Hey, welcome Dad Squad. I'm going to open up with some pre-show trivia, Dads. This is actually kind of an easy one. I think you're going to have no troubles. But I'm going to read you some quotes from a famous athlete. And I'm going to ask you, if you can, to identify the athlete and go ahead and put it in the comments if you can. I will accept either of two answers. All right, so here you go. Here's an actual quote from this famous athlete. He said, "I'm ready to go to war right now. If I see that boy in the street, I'll beat him before the fight. Beat him like I'm his daddy." That very same press conference interview, reporter said, "I saw Sonny Liston a few days ago. Ain't he ugly?" The athlete interrupts with, "I'm young, I'm handsome, I'm pretty, and I can't possibly be beat." All right, I think that's enough quotes for you to figure it out. Either you know it, you don't know it, but if you got it, go ahead and type it into the comments right away. Again, I'll accept either of two answers. Dads, let's see how well you got it. All right, Dad Squad, welcome to the Run With My Son show. And we are a bunch of dads who are determined to not let the headwinds of life push us off that path to a lifelong heart-to-heart relationship with our sons. And we do that through something we call runversations. Deliberate heart-to-heart conversations that we have with our sons as we're out and about running together, activating multisensory motor neuro pathways to help that conversation take foothold in his developing mind and help you build a connection with him. Kid sports, our topic today, can build some great character qualities. I mean, there's no doubt. And that sort of competitiveness can be channeled later in life to be successful in all sorts of arenas. But that competitiveness can have a dark side. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today, spotting an overly competitive heart and what you can do about it, dads, to bring him right back on course. So let me jump right on in with reason number one. We've identified, and I'm going to talk about 7 different signs that you can spot. There may be others, but here's number 1 of 7 that we identified this week. Number 1 is that he cries or throws a fit or otherwise just has a terrible time congratulating winners when he's on the opposing losing side of things. At the end of a hard-fought game where he, perhaps doesn't win, ties, or loses, even worse still, he can't acknowledge the hard work and the talent of other players, be they teammates or opponents. Can't even say good game or what a great job done. That's a sign, Dad, that there's a bit too much competitiveness going on. And I wondered this week, on pondering here this particular point, if our sons have a difficult time pointing out the good achievements of others because we ourselves, as dads, aren't freely expressing our own praise to them, to our sons, in our day-to-day lives. Not simply, on the field, but, hey, great job getting your homework done before I asked you to take a look at it. Or, hey, I appreciate the way you cleaned up your room today. Again, I was about to mention it, but you went ahead and did it before I even got a chance to. Little things like that throughout the whole day to just encourage him. If he isn't hearing a lot of that at home, you're not really modeling for him what it looks like to encourage somebody else's hard work. So it should be no surprise when those words are hard for him to find in the athletic arena here. And we've got to remember, Dad, when we do praise, and I've pointed this out in the past, other episodes, that we want to praise the effort and not necessarily the outcome, which could go either way. I mean, it honestly could be a loss, could be a win, but there's moments in both of those scenarios that are praiseworthy and ought to be praised. Wow, I really appreciate how hard you tried. I saw you running the whole game. That must have been difficult. Or I know that you didn't want to be there in that particular moment. You were a little intimidated by that other player, but you kept right on with him. That sort of praise. Praise is the effort and not the outcome. And so the association for him is to try harder and to continue to try hard, if for no other reason, to please Dad. So that's number 1. Number 2, and I guess I should finish up number 1 by reminding you, I don't think it's necessary, but sometimes we got to remind our sons that, it is about having fun, being social, being active, and getting that exercise. It's not about the winning. All right, back to number 2. Here's a sign you got an overly competitive kid when they actively cheat in the middle of a game, or they, didn't notice that my foot crossed the line, or even in a board game, a Monopoly, a chess, a couple of extra pieces suddenly have appeared on the board, or some extra cash was wound up in his hand, that sort of thing. Actively cheating, that's an overly competitive heart at play. Being aggressive is a competitive nature, but sometimes that aggressiveness can turn into misbehavior. Cheating is one of them. Just saying mean things to other players to try to intimidate the opponent. All right, number 3, very related, is when they actively try to ruin or worsen somebody else's good time, somebody else's fun. And that could be mocking or degrading other players. Regardless of how he himself is performing, if he laughs at the fault of somebody else who, accidentally, scores a self goal on his own team, by just the clumsiness of his feet, and that's not a laugh worthy thing. But when somebody strikes out, returns to the bench, and harsh words are exchanged. I mean, that is not helpful. It only worsens somebody else's enjoyment of the moment of the game, and it's a clear sign of over-competitiveness. I also want to point out some great advice I'd heard, and I'm using the term in this video, over-competitiveness, because I'm talking with you, Dad Squad, because I'm talking with dads. But when we go out there and we're talking to our sons, our children about this, I want to caution you not to use labels, to use good, better, best language when we're talking with our sons. Because if you give someone a label, gee, son, you're overly competitive today. I feel like that was an overly competitive kind of thing. Number one, if he understands what the term means, but number two, assuming he understands what it means, you've just labeled him and told him that he is something, and that's going to be self-fulfilling, I promise you, if it's repeated. So try to stay away from using labels like that, but good, better, best is a good approach for the terminology you should use. Right along this ruining someone else's good time, enjoyment of the sport, we were talking a little bit this week about the victory celebrations that can happen following a good play or following a win. The fist bump, yeah! That, is a slippery slope because it can go a little bit too far. I mean, some celebration is called for, and I'll talk about that here in a second. But the end zone dance that we see in the NFL that, just showboats and makes others feel bad, it definitely falls in this category of ruining others' good time and enjoyment of the moment. There should be a sense of humility that comes with our own accomplishments, and demonstrating some celebration that crosses that line shows just a lack of respect and compassion for others and their feelings. So when one dad sees this sort of end zone dance on television following a touchdown, he always makes it a point to point out to his kids how silly that is. And how doesn't that guy look like, a clown right now dancing around? He's supposed to be a professional. It's part of the name of the sport, right? And this so-called professional is dancing around, looking silly. Reminding our kids, when we see it in situations that are under our control, of what it truly is to other people. So, the understanding of what sportsmanship is comes from us. And I did mention a few seconds ago, this ought to be balanced. I don't mean to say in any way that we are to stifle all celebration. Hard work, celebration, it deserves and should be, they ought to feel some success. They ought to feel some excitement with their teammates, over a win or a score, or, somebody scored a run. They should be able to, feel good about it. But it's, the well-intentioned effort of trying to prevent them from crossing the line. Sometimes we can go too far and not allow for any of that. And that's not right either. Who comes to mind is Coach Bill Belichick from the Patriots. Famously stoic kind of a guy. But just this last June, following their Super Bowl win, his 7th, Brady's 5th, at the ring ceremony, he got the ring, and someone in the press asked him how he felt, and his quote was, "Great night, but we need to move on." Completely straight-faced. This guy is not about the parades and the confetti. He's just ready to move on, and that might be the other extreme, dads. That might be taking away celebration that's well deserved, and we got to allow for some of that for our kids. But if it's crossing the line and hurting others' feelings, then that's a sign that we got some over-competitiveness happening. All right, here, number 4. A sign of over-competitiveness is when you try to force others to compete in things that they don't want to. And I see it. I've got 3 sons, and they like to stand at the bus stop, and in order to pass the time, they'll do competitive things. They'll play rock, paper, scissors. They've got a number of little games they want to play, and sometimes not all of them want to play. But someone, looking for some enjoyment is forcing others to play with them. And maybe you've seen the same thing. Dragging someone to the board game table, or making every little thing into a competition. I counted more trees than you did on the drive to wherever we're going. I mean, that sort of dragging others, kicking and fighting that might mean a little bit over-competitiveness is happening. And I have seen this one. It was pointed out over and over again that this is probably seen most frequently in the adults and not in our kids. Every game you and I have ever been to, Dad Squad, there's adults on the sidelines watching the game who are themselves being abusive, being unsportsmanlike, saying the nastiest things to other players, to referees, to coaches, and sometimes in the name of being competitive. Oh, I'm just a competitive guy. So that's an excuse. That allows you to do inappropriate, unsportsmanlike behavior. I mean, I don't feel that way, and I don't think it should be. But a lot of parents, are feeling nostalgic about their own pasts, their glory days, whether they were successful or not in sports. They want to see vicariously, they want to see live through their children. They want their kids to compete and do well. So even that bad behavior, I have some understanding of where it comes from. But it's an overly competitive heart that wants to drag somebody else into a competition that our kids aren't yelling at the coaches. They're not prepared to take it to the back room for a fisticuffs brawl. But we as parents are leading them there. It shows a little bit of over competitiveness in our hearts. So just think about the example that we set. When we take our competitiveness to the extreme. And remember that, the coaches really ought to be the conduit. If you truly do have something that you think needs to be pointed out to the referee or the opposing coach, there's no reason why it needs to come from you directly from the sidelines. It's not appropriate. You can calmly relay that to your side's coach, and then should he agree, he then can relay it on. That's just the proper way to do things. It's a more controlled way to do things. And if you really want to be heard, honestly, that's the way you ought to go about it, because referees and opposing coaches are deliberately shutting out the spectators and the fans and the other parents. They might give a second thought when they hear it coming from another coach. So keep that in mind. All right, dads, before I jump into our last few signs, 5, 6, and 7, I hope you'll indulge me here for a second, because I want to tell you just why, for a second, I love the sport of running so much. The show here, we're called Run With My Son, and we're runners here in our family. When you think about a road race, all the spectators, the crowd, they line the route on both sides of the road, and they are there, in all likelihood because they've got a participant in the family or somebody they want to cheer on. But they're not silent for the other, 700 runners who go by. They are cheering for each and every individual. They are giving their full heart and applause to everybody. And in fact, excuse me for a second here. You run in a road race. The modern ones, you pre-register. They give you your number here. I don't know if I have an example in hand, but the more recent races, when you pre-register, you give them your name. They print your name right there on your bib number, so that as you're wearing your bib, the whole world, all these complete strangers, can see your first name. And the reason is not so that you have a great souvenir that you can put in your office with your name on it. The reason is so that the crowd can cheer you on by name. that's just the spirit and the heart that the sport of running has produced. A lot of finishers, early finishers, they cross the finish line, they go get a drink, and then they immediately circle back and they join the crowd on the sidelines and cheer on all the people that they just beat. So that's one of the amazing things about running. It's not a hyper-competitive sport, in my experience, at all. And if you, dads, are eager to start a father-son weekly running routine together, something I do highly recommend, let me take this moment to invite you to check out our free training plan. It's going to show you, I got mine right here, it's going to show you how to begin, how to get from where you are now, no matter where that is, fitness-wise, to being able to do a 5K road race with your son together, no matter what his age is, 4, 5, 6, 7 on up. This is a very unique offering that you can't find anywhere else. A couch to 5K training plan for kids. You can get it for free either on our website, runwithmyson.com, or even right here. If you're on Facebook, if you're watching on Facebook, you don't even have to leave the site. You can just type the words training plan in the comments, and hopefully it's experimental, but you'll get your training plan sent to you immediately right there in Facebook. You won't even need to leave. So check it out, and by all means, whatever method you use to get into a routine, find some one-on-one time with your son each and every week. It's so crucial that you guys can build that bond together. There's not going to be any other siblings. Mommy's not going to be along for the ride. Just one-on-one, you and him, and that's where this connection is born. All right, sorry for the interruption. I do have some more signs that your kid is overly competitive. So let me jump right back in here with number 5. A sign that he's overly competitive is that they are no longer having fun playing. What a surprise. They get so caught up in the competition and the winning and having the most, assists or the best, dribble or whatever the case might be, that it's no longer fun playing the game. And you know what? As you get older, you got to remember that you might remember today, but what you're not going to remember is what the score was today or who was the best dribbler. What you're going to remember at the end of the day, whether you won, whether you lost, even that fact probably will be forgotten. I know from my own childhood, I don't remember what any of my record was at the end of the season, but I remember the fun times that I had playing with my friends and enjoying the outdoors. It was a fun time. It was the sport itself that we are there to enjoy. And we have to foster that with our kids, dads. All right, reason number 6, or sign number 6, that your kid is way too over-competitive, probably ought to be obvious. It's injuries. You know what? If we push ourselves past what our body is telling us is too much, maybe you're being a little competitive. There was a dad who shared about, or a parent who shared about, it was a dad who shared about long after he felt the pain, he kept it a secret from his coach, from his teammates, because he wanted to continue to be in the game. And he'd go home and it would be hurting, and he would just be lying to the people around him so that he could play more. And now, not too much longer now, he's still a young guy, he's paying for that. He still has trouble, when the weather changes in his joints and feeling, the range of motion in his extremities isn't what it used to. It can go to far extremes, permanent memory loss. The pre-show trivia question I asked you about, dads, if you haven't figured out, I'll spoil it right now. That was Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay at the time. He ignored throughout the 1970s obvious signs to him. I was hearing in a biographical piece the other day. He knew that the punches that he was taking were having effects. He was feeling symptoms. And he ignored that because of his competitive heart. And he knew that he was the top of the world and the best of his game. He thought he could, shrug it off and heal. And he's a classic example. He developed permanent memory loss, mental degradation, and a lot of that was connected to these, horrible trauma. And we're hearing about it in recent news stories with professional football. And there's probably other sports that they can have more than just temporary damage to our bodies. So injuries, if your son or daughter is coming home with routine injuries every single season, multiple injuries every single season, maybe someone's a little bit too competitive. Might not be our children, it might be us, but keep that one in mind. And here's another one that was shared with me, and that's the crazy schedule, the time investment that is needed. Number 7, if your crazy schedule is preventing you from doing the normal things like homework. There was a mom who shared with me about her daughter, teenage daughter, who plays volleyball, and it's, number 1, every single day she either has practice, or if there's a game going on, then they'll skip the practice, but they'll have a game that day. She does that every day after school. Then she goes to work for her job, doesn't get home until 9:45 at night when she does, finally, her homework. Usually half the time, Mom says, soaking in an ice bath or putting a cooling pack on her knee or ankles or whatever. Sore joints. This one ties in with number 6, the injuries as well. But even forgetting the injuries, just think about that. If every single day between practice, the game, and work, you're not getting home until 9:45 to do your homework, how little sleep that child is getting to then get up the next morning and go to school again. So I've got neighbors down the street who've got 3 kids. They're a little bit older than ours, but not extremely older. And because of the way the school system here is in our town, they've got an elementary school student, their middle school student is in a different building, and their high school student is in a third building. And all 3 of these buildings have got offset start and end times in the day to allow the buses to accommodate all of them. So anyway, 3 different kids, 3 different schools, and at least 3 different sports at any given season. These kids play it all, and they've got not just their school leagues, they've got their travel teams and the evening tournaments that run through the summer. One of them is in softball, and that season began even before the school year did. She was going to her practices. And just the hecticness. I don't have to tell you parents, if you've got 1 or even multiple kids in sports, you already know how crazy the schedule can get. And that's not healthy for anybody. So keep that one in mind as far as a sign of over-competitiveness. So you've heard a bunch of signs of things that might be overly competitive. Let me end here with something uplifting. I'm going to show you a scene from a favorite sports movie. Maybe you got a go-to movie that you like to talk about. This one's great because I can share it with my sons who love it too, and they know exactly what I'm talking about. But this is a scene from Disney Pixar's Cars. And we got, let me set it up here. We got it's a 3-way race that's happening between these 3 competitors, but the ones you should pay attention to are our hero, Lightning McQueen, the red car, and then the villain, Chick Hicks, he's the green car. So check out this scene here. Lightning
McQueen is going to win the Piston Cup!
Infringement lawsuit from Disney. So, Lightning's...
I am not coming in behind you again, old man!
Look at this. Active cheating. Number 2 there. That guy. Lightning 3.
Oh no!
Look at this. Lightning's on his way to victory. And he sees what's going on. And look at that. He could have had it. Inches from the finish line. Lightning would have won that race.
Yeah!
Instead, the villain did.
I won, baby! Yeah!
With that end zone fist pump.
What's he up to, Doc?
Here's a memorable moment. Look at that.
What are you doing, kid?
I think the king should finish his last race.
Listen to this quote coming up.
You just gave up the Piston Cup. You know that?
This grumpy old race car I know once told me something.
It's just an empty cup.
Did you hear that?
Darryl,
Just
is
an empty
pushing
cup.
on the last lap
Not
legal?
about the
Hey,
winning
man, he's
and
not
losing
really pushing him.
outcome.
He's just giving him a little bump draft.
Celebration
What?
afterwards.
What's going on? That's what I call racing right there.
It's about love of the game. Last place in the race. You know who the real winner was there. All right. Back to full screen here. So take that example. You can tell that story to your kids if that's a movie that they relate to, or a story from your own life would be even better. Just letting them know the importance of having the right heart. Competitiveness is helpful in its arenas, but let's not take it too far. All All right, dads, thanks for joining us today. It's time to go take your father-son team to victory this week. And it's our job as dads to help raise citizens, right, who are going to improve the society that they're in. So their competitiveness should serve that and not serve to bring others down. And it all starts with those frequent one-on-one runversations that you're going to have together, you and your son. So for myself and the rest of the Dad Squad here, I want to thank you for joining us, welcome you to come and join us next week, and every Friday we're on at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. And in the meantime, do have a great week. We look forward to seeing you then.